The stars once sang with wonder. Now they whispered conquest. Above Earth's charred atmosphere, the Threnari flagship cut through the void like a silent blade. Cold, silver, and cruelly elegant, it loomed like a god come to pass judgment. In its shadow, the remnants of Earth's defense grid flickered and died, their final signals scattering into the black. Humanity's last defenses had fallen, its champions buried beneath centuries of silence and ruin. Admiral Veilcor stood on the observation deck, arms behind his back, violet eyes scanning the fractured world below. "There is no fire left," he declared with conviction, his voice calm as a tombstone. "This planet is ash, their warriors extinct." Behind him, a young Threnari tactician, Caliph, hesitated. And yet a signal was received. Primitive, yes, but unmistakably human. A call, not for help, for defiance. Veilcor turned, his gaze silencer. A dying spark, flickering the wind. Let it fade. But the spark would not fade. Beneath the ruined husks of collapsed cities and overgrown monuments, in the skeletal remains of old Denver, Lyra scavenged among ghosts. She moved like smoke, silent, swift, practiced. Her hair was hidden beneath a dust-stained hood, her hands wrapped in cloth patched more times than she could remember. She was 17 and had known war since she could walk. Her eyes, once wide with wonder, now narrowed with calculation. Life wasn't about dreaming. It was about surviving. Her brother Run waited atop a broken freeway. Their outpost a scavenger's nest of twisted steel and ancient tech. The two had learned early not to trust the open. The skies were no longer safe. Still, Lyra came bearing treasure, an old transceiver panel, mostly intact, from what used to be a military drone. Run's eyes lit up the moment she revealed it. "You think we can ping the orbital net?" he asked, voice low. "We can try," she answered, her voice tight. Hope was dangerous. Hope got people killed. The device was powered by a kinetic core, something even the Reapers missed when they stripped Earth satellites. They connected it to their battered console, half buried in a shipping crate beneath the old freeway overpass. When the panel lit up, sputtering static and faint code scrolls, Run gasped. "It works." Lyra didn't smile. She waited. An hour passed. Then another. The console chirped. A signal bounced back. Someone, somewhere was listening. The message they sent was short, patched together in bits of old Earth languages and pulse codes. Not a call for salvation. A warning. "They're coming." It read, "Hide your heat. Move underground. And remember." That last word was underlined. Not once, but 3 times. Run looked to his sister. Who sent that? Lyra didn't know, but she remembered stories, the kind her mother whispered before the bombs fell and the skies burned, of a man with no name, an old warrior, the last of the Terran Sentinels, buried in the mountains, sleeping, waiting. She never believed them, not truly, but the message changed everything. Miles away, deep within the frozen caverns of the Rockies, something stirred. Sensors, long dormant, flickered to life. Biomonitors recorded movement. Core temperatures rose. A heartbeat, slow, strong, echoed once again through alloyed bone and muscle. The cryopod cracked. Its occupant sat up, breath hissing through clenched teeth. Kael'varn, a relic of the Resistance, the last Earthborn, hybrid of man and machine, forged during humanity's final stand. He was not a myth. He was a weapon designed for extinction events, and Earth had finally triggered him. His mind was fogged with memory fragments, battles on lunar soil, firestorms across Mars, comrades lost one by one. He remembered the promise, to sleep until needed. And now, after all this time, Earth called him back. His armor still fit, though time had dulled its sheen. Each plate told a story. each scar price. He rose slowly, joints whirring with quiet fury. Outside, snow blanketed the land, hiding scars of war beneath its pristine silence. Kale Varn walked into the world again. In Ember Zone 14, the Reapers, a subsect of Threnari warriors bred for planetary subjugation, descended on what was left of the southern continent. They moved like locusts, harvesting tech, crushing resistance, uploading minds into their crystalline archives. To them, Earth was already dead, until a Reaper dreadnought exploded mid-flight. It hadn't been shot down. It had been torn apart. Footage leaked. A blur of black and silver. A figure walking through fire. Heat sensors shorted. Radar scrambled. And the last frame showed a single burning eye beneath a fractured helmet. The Reapers sent more. They vanished. Veilcore watched the footage. Fists clenched. "This cannot be," he growled. That project was terminated. Humanity's sentinels were erased. But Kale Varn was never part of a project. He was the last will of Earth. News of the ghost warriors spread in whispers across ravaged townships through pirate radio bands and encoded on wind-scattered data chips. Survivors began speaking his name, not as a savior, as a reminder. Earth still remembers, they said, and Earth fights back. In one such camp, hidden beneath the ruins of old Seattle, Lyra and Run received a visitor, a scout named Varric. He was lean, with hardened eyes and a transmitter embedded in his neck. "I saw him," Varric said. "I saw the old one. He tore through a Reaper platoon like smoke. They didn't even scream." Lyra studied him. "And you want us to believe he's real?" "I don't care if you believe," he said. "I want you to help me find him." Lyra exchanged a glance with her brother. Run nodded slightly. And so the search began. Kale Varn was not hiding, but the world had changed, and he moved carefully. He did not know who to trust. The Threnari had agents everywhere, humans twisted by cybernetic loyalty, informants trading safety for survival. But he knew the land, the veins of Earth, and it still welcomed him. He found old resistance caches buried beneath temples and schoolhouses, weapons he once wielded, maps no one remembered. He moved through them like a shadow, gathering strength. But it wasn't enough. He needed allies. When Lyra, Run, and Varric finally tracked him to an old monastery nestled against a frozen cliff, they didn't bring weapons drawn. They brought memories. Lyra stood before him, her voice firm. "You're him." Kale Varn studied her. "You are young to carry such fire." "Fire's all we got left." He stepped closer, towering, broad-shouldered, worn by war but far from broken. "And what would you ask of an old soldier? Teach us. Let us." He looked past her, to the horizon, to the sky. "I do not lead," he said quietly. "I only walk where I am needed." Run spoke. "Then walk with us." Kale Varn did not answer. He turned, entering the monastery's ruins. But he did not close the door behind him. That night, Lyra sat with him by a fire. They shared stories, hers of hunger, of losing her parents in a firestorm, his of comrades who fell for inches of scorched earth. She watched as something inside him shifted, not pity, but recognition. The girl before him was not a soldier. Not yet, but she had the soul of one. In the shadows of the monastery, the fire burned, and outside, the stars began to move again. Rain pelted the metallic remains of the battlefield, hissing as it evaporated against the still warm wreckage of machines long abandoned. The skies, always brooding, seemed heavier today, like the earth itself remembered what had been lost, and what was now quietly, subtly returning. The old one had awakened, and the tremors of his reemergence had not gone unnoticed. Far above the earth, in the obsidian halls of the Threnari High Command, The elite cast of alien overlords watched the tremors with cold amusement. These were not creatures bound by emotion or sentiment. They were conquerors, tacticians, engineers of suppression. For generations, they had ruled Earth through fear and mechanical superiority. The resistance had been quashed, the old warriors forgotten, and humanity reduced to labors and remnants of myths. Yet now, somewhere deep within the forested ruins of the Siberian Black Zones, sensors picked up something unexpected, a surge of biomechanical energy that matched no known signal. Not human, not Threnari. Something else. Something ancient. General Vale Kor, one of the highest-ranking tacticians of the Threnari fleet, studied the reports in silence. No anomaly appears without a cause, he hissed to the analysts clustered around him. Send a scouting detachment. I want to know what's waking the dust of dead warriors. Back on Earth, far from the clean precision of alien ships, a young woman named Lyra crouched beneath a collapsed rail station in the old outskirts of Kazan. Her short-cropped hair was matted with soot and sweat, her hands blackened from scouring the ruins for salvage. She moved like a shadow, quick, careful, invisible to the Threnari drones that scoured the ruins daily. Lyra was part of a scattered resistance that didn't even call itself one anymore. They were just survivors, people too stubborn to forget what freedom had once tasted like. Her father had told her stories, of fire, of honor, of the old ones who once stood against the stars and bled for the soil beneath their feet. As a child, she believed him. As an adult, she had buried such legends with the bones of her kin. But recently, something had changed. She'd felt it, not just in the shaking of the earth or the strange magnetic pulses that made compasses spin erratically. She felt it in her chest, in her dreams. A presence, watchful, aching, ancient, one that called to her in a voice like cracked stone and broken fire. 2 days earlier, Lyra had ventured beyond the permitted zones into a stretch of woodland untouched since the first invasion. That's where she found it, a crater, glowing faintly, surrounded by trees bowed as if in reverence. And in the center, embedded in ash and root, a figure kneeling, not dead, not alive, waiting. She didn't dare go closer. Not then, but now she returned, guided by something she didn't understand. The figure remained where she'd found it, still as stone, but breathing. She could see it now, even in the shadows. His armor was unlike anything she had ever seen, forged of metals and fibers that shimmered and flexed like muscle. Etchings on the plates pulsed faintly, echoing ancient scripts lost to time. His eyes opened. She stumbled back, heart hammering in her throat. You. His voice was a whisper that shook the leaves. Lyra found her voice. What are you? He rose slowly like a mountain waking. I was sealed to protect the world from what I had become. And now you brought me back. I didn't mean to. No, but you were meant to. His presence was suffocating, not because he threatened her, but because everything about him screamed of history, of memory, of war. He looked human, but not. Taller, broader, eyes like molten metal. He moved with purpose, even after centuries of stillness. They have returned, he said, looking toward the sky. You know the Threnari? They fear what they cannot kill. That is why I was buried. He began walking. Lyra followed, still stunned, compelled. What do I call you? He paused. In the old tongue, I was called Kael'varn, but names mean little. I am what remains. Kael'varn moved to the forest like he had never left it. Creatures hushed as he passed. The earth no longer trembled in fear. It held its breath in awe. They reached an abandoned communications tower. Lyra had used in the past to listen for resistance signals, but it had long since gone silent. Kael'varn touched the rusted metal. Energy surged through his fingertips. The tower groaned and whined, lights flickering back to life. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Calling the broken. They will hear me." Indeed, hundreds of miles away, in shattered bunkers and deep forest shelters, old transmitters crackled to life. Those who still remembered the old signals paused. Elders who once fought, children who had never known light, all turned toward the static that whispered one message: the Old One walks. High above, Veilcore received the signal too. He did not smile. The Threnari did not smile, but his tone grew colder. "Prepare the suppression units. He cannot be allowed to wake the embers." Meanwhile, Kael Varn stood on the rusted platform, gazing at a world both familiar and foreign. "You were not supposed to suffer this," he said quietly. "We fought so you would be free. You're one of them, aren't you?" Lyra asked. "I was human, once, but I took upon me the forge of the ancients, the fire of forgotten science. I became what I had to be, to end the first war. And you were sealed? I was too much. Even victory needs limits. I became a weapon with no place in peace." The sadness in his voice was heavier than steel. Lyra nodded. "Then maybe it's time for weapons to rise again." Kael Varn looked at her, not with pity, but with recognition. "Then we go to awaken others. There are still those who remember. Warriors hidden, broken, scattered, but not defeated. Together, they vanish into the forest, shadows dancing behind them. The world was no longer quiet, and war was waking once more. Wind whipped through the dead pines, carrying whispers of movement that had not been heard in generations. Where silence once ruled, footsteps now disturbed the ash. Kael Varn and Lyra moved quickly through the dense underbrush, never resting long. Each hour they pressed deeper into forgotten places, searching for those buried in memory and myth. The world was older than the Threnari knew, and its history ran deeper than the shallow roots of conquest. Beneath ancient rock and forgotten steel bunkers, others slept, warriors like Kael Varn, who had traded their humanity for the hope of peace. He could feel them, sense them. They were waiting for a signal, and now that he had stirred, they were beginning to wake. Lyra kept close, trying to match his pace, though exhaustion tugged at her limbs. She watched him when he didn't notice, the way his shoulders tensed when the sky darkened, how his eyes scanned every hill with the caution of a seasoned soldier. He was a relic, but he was not brittle. He was forged of something more enduring, regret and resolve. In the ruins of a city once called Perm, they found the first. Kael Varn led them to a subterranean vault sealed behind layers of collapsed earth and time. He raised a hand, and the soil shifted, revealing a corridor lined with old security runes flickering in recognition. Inside, suspended in a field of shimmering energy, floated a figure even taller than Kael Varn, wrapped in layers of armor plating inscribed with the marks of 1,000 battles. Kael Varn placed his hand on the control node. The field dropped with a hiss. The warrior fell to his knees, coughing as air rushed into lungs long unused. "Name?" Kael Varn asked. The figure rose, wiping blood from his mouth. "Varric, battle-class Titan. Last seen in the siege of Duskfall." Lyra stared, wide-eyed. "There are more of you?" "Dozens," Kael Varn said, "hidden across the earth, buried in shame, feared by those we saved." Varric rolled his shoulders, metal grinding faintly. "We're waking up?" Finally, Kael Varn nodded. "The Threnari returned, and they think Earth is empty." Varric's laugh was dry and bitter. "Then let's remind them." They traveled south, drawing closer to what remained of the European strongholds. Along the way, they found two more. Kael'tha, once a stealth operative whose body shimmered with adaptive camo even in sleep, and Run, a towering shield-bearer who spoke only in short, weighted phrases. Each time one awakened, Kael Varn seemed to grow quieter. He watched their reactions, the pain in their eyes as they realized the war never truly ended. Lyra walked beside Kaelatha during a rest beneath an overpass. "You knew him before?" Lyra asked. Kaelatha nodded. "He was the first, the prototype. We followed him not because of his power, but because he never asked us to. He bore the burden alone until we refused to let him." "Do you remember peace?" Lyra asked. Kaelatha's face hardened. "We never got to see it. Up above them, the skies shimmered unnaturally. Drones. The Thrunari had found their trail. Kael Varn didn't wait for orders. Scatter. No fire unless necessary. If they lock onto our signal, we'll have no place left to run." They disappeared into the shadows, blending with the wreckage of a once great world. Lyra moved fast, ducking between rusted train cars and vines that choked the old rails. A drone buzzed past overhead, then circled back. It saw her. She dove as the pulse blasted the car behind her, shattering metal into fragments. Kael Varn appeared before the next shot landed, his arm raised. The blast deflected off a barrier he summoned with a roar of energy. "You will not take another," he growled. With a flick of his wrist, he hurled a spear of light into the drone's core. It exploded midair, the sound echoing like thunder through the valley. But it was too late. The damage was done. They knew. From orbit, General Veilcore watched the footage with growing disdain. "Deploy the Reapers. If the old one insists on waking ghosts, we will bury them again. Permanently." Within hours, ships darkened sky. Unlike the elegant cruisers that once patrolled Earth, these were brutish, angular, designed for siege and extermination. The Reapers were not scouts. They were executioners. Kael Varn and the others gathered in an abandoned church, its stained glass windows shattered but still casting fractured light. They stood around a decaying altar, weapons laid out before them. "We can't outrun this," Kaelatha said. "Then we stand," Varric added. "We've been waiting centuries to finish this." Kael Varn looked to Lyra. "You don't need to be part of this. When we fight, cities fall. This isn't your war." She stepped forward. "It's my world, and I'd rather die on my feet than serve on my knees." He studied her for a long moment. Then he handed her a blade, a strange thing, sleek and warm to the touch. "Then fight like one of us." The battle began at dawn. The Reapers descended with brutal precision, deploying squads of biomechanical infantry that tore through the outskirts of the settlement. The earth shook with each impact. Civilians scattered. The old warriors rose. Kael Varn launched himself into the air, crashing into a Reaper mech mid-flight. He drove his arm to the cockpit, ripping out its core with a scream that echoed for miles. Kaelatha vanished into shadow, emerging behind enemy lines to sabotage their field units. Varric charged headlong into a wall of fire, absorbing the blast with his bulk before crushing a dozen enemies with a swing of his hammer. Lyra fought too. She was no match in strength, but she was quick, smart, and fearless. She used the blade to disable drones, coordinated rescue paths for survivors, and relayed signals to other resistance cells. For every warrior that fell, 3 more Thrunari died. And yet, the battle pressed on. Hours passed in smoke and blood. Near nightfall, Kael Varn fell. A Reaper captain, twice his size and wielding a plasma flail, struck him down in a burst of crackling energy. He crashed into the remnants of a collapsed highway, unmoving. Lyra saw it happen. Rage overtook fear. She sprinted toward him, dodging debris, her screams lost in the storm. Kaelatha reached Kael Varn first, dragging him from the wreckage. "His core is unstable," she hissed. "He'll go critical." "No!" Lyra cried. "There has to be a way." Kael Varn's eyes fluttered open. "You must run. The fire in me, it's too old. Too hungry. I'm not leaving you." He gripped her wrist. "Then help me finish it." Together, they stood. He was broken, one leg shattered, armor cracked, but he burned with something brighter than pain. They moved as one, toward the Reaper captain who had brought him down. Lyra flanked, striking low, slicing through exposed circuitry. Kael Varn struck high, his fist a meteor of righteous fury. The Reaper fell, and the tide turned. Across the battlefield, resistance forces surged. Civilians joined the fray, emboldened by the return of legends. By night's end, the Reapers were in retreat. The sky no longer wept fire. The earth, scarred and steaming, sighed in relief. Kael Varn collapsed beside a ruined wall, his body sparking faintly. Lyra knelt beside him. "You're still here," she whispered. He smiled faintly. Not for long, but long enough. Varric, Kael'thas, and Run gathered around him. For the first time in ages, they were together, not as weapons, but as witnesses. "Then we rebuild," Kael'thas said. "From the ashes," Kael Varn nodded. "And next time, no more sealing away what the world needs." Lyra gripped his hand. "We remember now." He looked at her, eyes dimming. "Then the fire won't die." And the stars above flickered, as if bowing to a warrior who had given everything, twice, for a world still learning to be free. The battle was over, but the war was not won. The Reapers had retreated, leaving behind smoldering fields and broken machines. But the Threnari would come again. Of that, everyone was certain. The stars still shimmered with hostile intent, and the skies held the weight of tomorrow's conflict. Yet in the stillness that followed, a new kind of silence blanketed the land. One bore not despair, but resilience. Kael Varn remained motionless beneath a collapsed section of the tower, his frame barely flickering with life. Lyra had not left his side. The others stood in a solemn ring, weapons lowered, expressions unreadable. Run knelt beside him, laying a heavy hand on Kael Varn's chest. "He burns low," Run murmured, "but he burns still." Lyra turned her face upward. "Then he hasn't given up on us." No one spoke for several moments. The wind played gently with the ash, sweeping across ruined stone and cracked roads. The city had been claimed and reclaimed too many times, its bones groaning beneath centuries of conflict. But now, a new foundation was being set, not of concrete or metal, but of unity. The people came slowly in cautious trickles. Survivors from hidden bunkers, wanderers from the wastelands, and rebels who had never known anything but fight or flight. They followed the trail left by the battle, the smoke like a beacon in the sky. When they saw Kael Varn, some wept openly. Others knelt, placing relics or tokens beside him. A broken pendant, a rusted soldier's badge, even a child's drawing on old cloth. The old warrior had become a symbol again. Lyra rose, facing the gathered crowd. She felt their questions, their fear. They had won a battle, yes, but what came next? "We rebuild," she said, "not as survivors hiding in shadows, but as people who remember who we are. We've seen what we're capable of, not just the old warriors, but all of us." Varric stepped forward. "We're going to train those who are willing, protect those who cannot fight, build defenses the Threnari will fear." Kael'thas nodded, her voice sharp and clear. "We will not sleep again. We are not myths or legends. We are the earth's fire, and it will not be snuffed out." The people responded, not with cheers, but with action, clearing rubble, sharing supplies, marking the perimeter with sensors and crude barricades. It began not with declarations, but with the first stone laid. Kael Varn's body remained unmoved, but something within him sparked. He wasn't fully gone, just waiting. Lyra sat with him every night, recounting stories of those they saved, names of children who now laugh without fear, of farmers planting where ruins once stood, of songs sung again under open skies. Weeks passed. The stronghold grew. What had been a battlefield was now called Ember Hold. New alliances formed. Scattered factions who once warred over scraps came to join the effort. Engineers rewired dormant satellites. Old tech was unearthed and repurposed. Ancient frequencies lit up with messages. Calls to others who had not yet dared to hope. And then one night, Cale Varn's eyes opened. He did not speak, not at first, just looked at Lyra and then at the makeshift encampment bustling with life beyond the shattered window. "You did this," he said finally, his voice hoarse but strong. Lyra smiled. "No, we did. You gave us a chance." He sat up slowly, pain etched deep into his movements. But he was alive, and the people came to see him, some shy, others bold. They asked questions, told stories. One little girl climbed onto his lap and gave him a handmade flower. He stared at it as if it were a relic more precious than any artifact. Veil core, orbiting Earth, watched in growing frustration. The Reapers had failed. The people were not broken. Worse still, they had begun to rise. His subcommanders whispered of unrest. Other planets under Fernari rule were listening. Earth was becoming dangerous, not because of its warriors, but because of its spirit. He convened the High Circle, spoke of erasure, of planetary cleansing. But others disagreed. Some saw the folly of war, the cost, the persistence of these humans who refused to die. Seeds of doubt began to fester in the very halls of Fernari power. Back on Earth, the warriors continued their mission, not with weapons alone, but with compassion. They taught, guided, protected. They were no longer weapons. They were mentors. Cale Varn stood again in full armor, though he no longer carried his sword. "This fight is not about winning," he told the crowd. "It's about enduring, about showing them and ourselves that we are more than what they feared." One night, the skies shimmered with another arrival, but not a fleet. A single Fernari ship, white-flagged, descended and landed beyond the city limits. From it emerged an envoy, not soldiers, but scholars, diplomats, carriers of words rather than fire. They came not with threats, but with questions. How had Earth survived? Why did the fire not die? Cale Varn met them with Lyra at his side, because we remembered who we were, and we chose to be more. Peace was not instant. It was not easy, but it began. And in that beginning, the war truly ended. Years passed. The Earth healed. Children grew up hearing stories of the Old One and the fire he carried, of a girl who reminded a world to stand, of warriors who awoke not for glory, but for the chance to see a better tomorrow. Cale Varn lived long enough to see the stars without fear. When his body finally failed, it was not with violence, but with peace. He passed beneath a sunlit sky, surrounded by friends, laughter, and songs. He was buried beneath the first tree to bloom in the reclaimed city. The marker read, "He walked when we had forgotten how," and in his steps we learned to rise. Lyra became the voice of a new generation. She did not take power, but shared it. She stood on the ashes of a broken world and helped build something brighter. A federation of planets soon followed, inspired by Earth's rise. Not an empire, but an alliance, built on respect, memory, and the fire of those who never gave up. And though many years would pass, and the galaxy would change again and again, one truth remained. The fire of Earth never truly dies. It waits, for when the stars forget, the Old One will walk again. If this story lit a spark in you, if you felt the fire stir, share it, remember it, carry it, because sometimes the most powerful weapon is memory, and the greatest victory is the will to stand again. Subscribe for more stories like this, where legends are born not from power, but purpose, where the past teaches us, and the future calls us forward. And if you're still here, maybe you're one of the ones who will carry that fire. Be the spark, Be the flame. Walk forward, together,